On a cold January morning in 1900, Frankfort, Kentucky woke beneath a low gray sky, the kind that presses down on a town and makes every sound feel muffled, every footstep heavier than it should be. The Kentucky River moved slowly beside the Capitol, its surface dull and metallic, reflecting a nation still unsettled by the end of the 19th century. Reconstruction had ended decades earlier, but its aftershocks lingered. Politics in Kentucky was not a matter of polite debate or distant ideology. It was personal. It was bitter. And it was dangerous. William Justice Goebel was 44 years old when he walked toward the old state capitol that morning. He was a small man physically, sharp-featured, often described as cold, humorless, and calculating. His enemies called him ruthless. His supporters called him incorruptible. Few called him likable. Goebel had built his career not on charm, but on precision, an almost surgical understanding of law and power. Born in Pennsylvania and raised in Kentucky, he was a trained lawyer, a state senator, and one of the most polarizing political figures the state had ever produced. By 1900, he stood at the center of a constitutional crisis that had split Kentucky into hostile camps. The gubernatorial election of 1899 had been chaotic and deeply contested. Goebel, a Democrat, faced William S. Taylor, a Republican, in a race marred by allegations of fraud, voter intimidation, and ballot manipulation on both sides. When the initial count declared Taylor the winner, Goebel refused to concede. Instead, he turned to the legislature, where Democrats held a narrow advantage, and to a controversial election law he himself had helped craft years earlier. A special contest board was formed to review the results. Republicans saw it as a naked power grab. Democrats saw it as lawful correction. Frankfort became a city under siege, filled with armed guards, political operatives, and rumors of violence whispered in hotel corridors and saloons. By late January, the situation had reached a breaking point. The legislature met under heavy security. Militia units loyal to different factions lingered nearby. Taylor, still acting governor, declared a state of insurrection and called out the militia, then moved the seat of government to London, Kentucky, deep in Republican territory. Democrats called it illegal. The capital was paralyzed, suspended between two governors, two claims to legitimacy, and a population bracing for bloodshed. On the morning of January 30, William Goebel left his lodging and walked toward the Capitol, accompanied by two men. He was cautious by nature, but not fearful enough to stay away. As he approached the building, a shot cracked through the winter air. It came from above, from the direction of a nearby building overlooking the Capitol grounds. The bullet struck Goebel in the chest, tearing through his lung. He collapsed onto the pavement, blood spreading quickly across his coat. For a moment, there was confusion rather than panic. Then the reality settled in. Someone had just shot a man who might soon be governor of Kentucky. Goebel was carried inside. Physicians were summoned. Word spread through Frankfort like fire through dry timber. Within hours, the shooting had become not just an attack on a man, but an assault on the state itself. No one saw the shooter clearly. Some claimed to have heard the sound echo from a specific building. Others remembered faces at windows, shadows moving too quickly to fix in memory. The weapon was never definitively identified at the scene. What remained was a wounded politician and a city trembling on the edge of chaos. Despite his injuries, Goebel remained conscious. He spoke quietly, reportedly aware of the gravity of his condition. Outside, political machinery ground forward without pause. On January 31, as Goebel lay dying, the legislature completed its work. The contest board invalidated enough Republican votes to declare him the winner. In a grim and unprecedented moment, William Goebel was sworn in as governor of Kentucky while lying in bed, too weak to stand, his voice faint but resolute. The symbolism was stark. Power transferred not in triumph, but in blood. For days, 18 physicians attended him, employing every medical knowledge available at the turn of the century. They drained fluids, monitored his breathing, fought infection with limited tools. Visitors came and went, speaking in hushed tones. Guards watched the corridors. Outside, accusations flew freely. Republicans claimed Democrats had staged the shooting to seize power. Democrats insisted the assassination was the final act of a Republican conspiracy to prevent Goebel from governing. Each side spoke with absolute certainty, and neither offered proof that could not be questioned. On February 3, 1900, William Goebel died. He had been governor for just 4 days. His death cemented his place in American history as the only state governor assassinated while in office. It also ensured that the truth of what happened would never be simple. The investigation began immediately, but it was compromised from the start by politics. Frankfort was flooded with armed men, partisan investigators, and witnesses who knew that what they said could change the balance of power, or cost them their lives. Attention quickly turned to the executive building across from the Capitol, where the shot was believed to have originated. Several men were arrested, including former Secretary of State Caleb Powers, a close ally of William S. Taylor. Powers was accused of orchestrating the assassination, though evidence tying him directly to the trigger was circumstantial and contested. Witnesses testified to seeing men with rifles near the windows. Others contradicted those accounts. Timelines shifted subtly between statements. Memories sharpened or softened depending on who was asking the questions. The alleged assassin, a man named James B. Howard, would later be convicted, then see his conviction overturned, retried, and ultimately pardoned. Powers himself was convicted multiple times, only to be released after years in prison when political tides changed once again. What remains striking is not just the violence of the act, but the environment that made it possible. Kentucky at the dawn of the 20th century was a place where loyalty to party outweighed loyalty to process, where the law was a weapon, and where the line between political strategy and criminal conspiracy blurred beyond recognition. Goebel himself had played hardball politics, crafting laws that concentrated power and angered opponents. Some historians argue that his own tactics helped create the conditions that led to his death. Others reject that framing, seeing it as an attempt to rationalize murder. No definitive consensus has ever been reached. The identity of the person who fired the fatal shot remains officially unresolved, buried beneath layers of testimony, overturned verdicts, and political rewrites of history. What is clear is that William Goebel walked into a storm of his own era, and the storm consumed him. Today, the streets of Frankfort are quiet. The old buildings still stand, their windows reflecting the same river, the same winter light. There is no echo of the gunshot, no stain on the pavement. But the story lingers, unresolved, a reminder that democracy, when pushed to its limits, can fracture in unexpected and deadly ways. The murder of Governor William Goebel was not just a crime against one man. It was a moment when the machinery of government faltered, and a single bullet exposed how fragile power can be when trust collapses. And even now, more than a century later, the question remains suspended in time, unanswered and unsettling. Who truly decided that morning that William Goebel would not live to govern, and why was the truth never allowed to fully surface?